Today I'm going to try and communicate my interpretation of one of the sections in Arthur Schopenhauer's The World as Will and Representation. I'm going to be focusing on the third book, or the third section of the first volume of this work, which is third book, The World as Representation, second aspect. So to get started, I'm just going to briefly talk about something he mentioned in the previous two sections, which is that for Arthur Schopenhauer, in his Metaphysics, he believes that human beings are simply beings who perceive the external world through time and space. And for him, time exists as succession, and the succession of events, and space exists simply as emptiness, so empty space. And that humans, with various different systems throughout history, have used arithmetic and math to measure both time and space to make our lives easier. For instance, a clock is a unit of measurement to measure the succession of events. And the metric system is a way to measure space. And also the calendar is a way to measure time through years and months, and so on. Now, for his third section, I want to start with an analogy that he uses, and he questions the reader. So if you're at home watching this, I want you to picture a tree in your head. So just think of a tree, what you would think of if I were to tell you to think of a tree. Now, if you're like me, the tree that you would think of, this is really bad drawing, but the tree that you would think of would probably be this one, but it might be like a palm tree, or any of these versions, maybe something that looks a little different. But the thing that's interesting that Arthur Schopenhauer points out is, he says, quote, "I contemplate a tree aesthetically, i.e. with artistic eyes, and thus recognize not in it but ideas. It is immediately of no importance whether it is this tree or its ancestor that flourished 1,000 years ago, and whether the contemplator is this individual or any living anywhere at any time. The particular thing and the knowing individual are abolished with the principle of sufficient reason, and nothing remains but the idea and the pure subject of knowing." And then he says that the idea is released not only from time, but also from space. So what he's basically saying is that your idea of a tree that you have in your head, whichever of these it is, or whatever you picture of a tree, isn't an existing tree in time or in space. So to better show this, I drew a quick chart on the back of Target, but so the x-axis here represents space, or location, and I put some locations, for instance, my house, your house. I put Athens, London, New York City, China, etc. And then on the y-axis, I put time. So I put now, I put 1 minute ago, 1800s, the 1600s, etc. So basically, if right now you are trying to imagine in your house, you're imagining the tree, that tree actually doesn't exist in time or space, because you could have that idea if you were at your house, or if you were in Germany, or if you lived in the 1600s and you thought of a tree. So it doesn't matter where you are. And basically what Arthur Schopenhauer is trying to suggest is that in the world, through human experience, there exists these ideas that are independent of the individual and independent of time and space. And he believes that it's through genius and through artistic works, such as literature and art, such as sculpting and painting, that geniuses try to communicate ideas that are independent of time and space to the masses. So, for instance, on poetry, he says of poetry, in the lyrics of genuine poets is reflected the inner nature of the whole of mankind, and all that millions of past, present, and future human beings have found and will find in the same constantly reoccurring situations, find in them its corresponding expression, since these situations, by constant recurrence, exist as permanently as humanity itself, and always call up the same sensations. The lyrical productions of genuine poets remain true, effective, and fresh for thousands of years. So, for instance, if you look at any modern hit songs, like the 7-Year-Old Song, or even if you look at like Elvis Presley's Heartbreak Hotel. Elvis Presley's Heartbreak Hotel, he's the artist, and he wrote that in the 1900s, and let's just pretend he wrote it in New York City. In New York City would be on the y-axis, or excuse me, x-axis of space, and in 1900s would be on the x-axis of time. But on the z-axis is ideas independent of time and space. And I could pluck out Elvis Presley's Heartbreak Hotel, and I could put that in 1800s London. And every human who's able to understand English and can understand what Elvis Presley is actually saying will understand the ideas behind his Heartbreak Hotel song. And therefore, these ideas are independent of time and space. Another example is the ideas on the chaos and unfairness of love that William Shakespeare has in many of his plays, such as Romeo and Juliet and Midsummer Night's Dream. If you take Shakespeare in London in the 1600s, right here, right there, I could pluck out those ideas in his writings, which high school English classes in America have for decades. You could pluck out those ideas, and you could put that at my house or at my high school in now, like in 2016, and the ideas of love and the chaos of love are just as true now as they were in the 1600s, and just as true now in the 1600s as they were in ancient times, ancient Greece, or ancient Egypt, or whatever. So, assuming that you are able to understand the communication mode, for instance, I couldn't really read Old English, or whatever Shakespeare writes in, but once I translate it, or I can't even understand Arthur Schopenhauer in German, but once it's translated into English and I can understand what he's saying, the ideas that he's presenting, which I'm presenting in this video, is absent him writing it in Germany in the 1800s, because I'm able to pluck that idea into any point in space and time. And for anyone who's familiar with Arthur Schopenhauer, they know that he has a pretty pessimistic standpoint on human affairs, and he claims that tragedy and the tragic play is one of the greatest mirrors and reflections on the human experience, simply because of how tragic it is. So let me read you what he writes on tragedies to better emphasize his point. Schopenhauer writes that tragedy is to be regarded and is recognized as the summit of poetic art, both as regards the greatness of the effect and the difficulty of the achievement. For the whole of our discussion, it is very significant and worth noting that the purpose of this highest poetical achievement is a description of the terrible side of life, the unspeakable pain, the wretchedness and misery of mankind, the triumph of wickedness, the scornful mastery of chance, and the irretrievable fall of the just and innocent are all here presented to us, and here is to be found a significant hint as to the nature of the world and of existence. End quote. So, as yet another example, the playwright Sophocles of ancient Greece